Okay, To Have or To Have, or To Have or To Be by Erich Fromm. It's a 1976 nonfiction, obviously. Kind of contrary to my usual tendencies of doing a lot of fiction. I've been on kind of a fiction binge, and that's kind of my area of, I don't want to say expertise because that sounds a little bit highfalutin, but just definitely my area of comfort, I'd say. That's where I feel most at home. But with um, this, every now and then I do kind of indulge in a, or I should say it's actually a little bit, maybe not, it's a little harder for me to kind of focus and like, I think there's definitely a difference. I'm not sure if I stated this before, between reading a nonfiction, like a more of a philosophical difference between, like more of a, like a, let's say a dissertation or like some kind of, philosophical work or masterwork. Let's say it's a lot harder to read, Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness, and versus reading something by like, I don't know, like like a kind of let's Daniel Steele or something, like a fiction. Not to like necessarily harp on her work that much, but yeah. So Eric Fromm, he lived from 1900 to 1980, I believe, and he was a humanistic philosopher, like a social theory. It seems like what he's combining in what I got from this isn't the only thing I've read by him so far. It's a pretty short work, little introduction. But yeah, it is. I got the sense that he is a combining everything from a kind of holistic melding of both humanistic philosophy, psychology, with like a little bit of Freud and Jung, and a mix between that and like a dash of social theory. That and Eastern mysticism, a quite a bit of that as well. Like there's references to the Vedas or the Vedantic kind of Hindu and both that and kind of Buddhist texts too. Buddhist kind of you know kind of ideologies. So yeah, he talks about this. The title of it, To Have or To Be. He talks about the differentiation between that, like between that wanting to have something, and it reminded me a bit of Martin Buber's I and Thou relationship, in that like if you're constantly kind of striving to be the I in the situation, to be the I in your life, and you don't make any room for the thou, the other, and in this case for Buber, I guess. In his case, it was more like as a Jewish kind of mysticism that he kind of expressed was more so the kind of giving unto others. That was like if you get too caught up in your own ego, in your kind of, which is why Eastern stuff shows up a lot in his stuff too, and also Emmanuel Levinas, Totality and Infinity, which I think I read about last year, maybe 2 years ago, was also kind of an interesting kind of I saw, not just because they were both French thinkers, but I saw also parallels to Simone Weil, or Weil, Simone Weil, Whale. I think it's Way. I think the V. I think the V. I don't think there's a V in, if you're in a French name. I don't think you pronounce that out loud. But I think Simone Weil, her stuff. Like the need for roots, the need for Platonic otherness, like this other. Something like the truth in its capital T, like beyond the scope of our kind of pitiful structures of what we attempt to do. Like there's something way outside of us, and that's like I think what Levinas was trying to say. But I'm trying to connect this to Fromm, because Fromm was coming at a similar thing. He talks about like an interesting thing with like there's like a desire, like you have a desire to love and to be loved. But what is the difference between to be loved and to be loved? And he was saying that love isn't a physical object that you just like, oh, like I have love, I have your love, and love has become such a kind of cliched, hackneyed term, phrase that we use as a catch-all thing. It's like I love this person, I love that, I love you, and it's kind of a thing, and it differs. It's like it's kind of has like there's a romantic love, and there's an intimate kind of. And then there's also platonic love, and all the different kind of stipulations that people make for love. But in Fromm's case, he says that love is something that you can't have. Love is just something that is. It's like a physical. It isn't like a. Well, I think he said it's like it's not a physical material possession that you can just like kind of co-opt, usurp for yourself. But it is something that just is like a kind of duty. You live it out kind of way. Like it's a dutiful kind of compassion that is disinterested too, and not disinterested is like a kind of like gets a flack kind of term. It's not like a scientific kind of. It's not always so like a spooky kind of bad thing to be disinterested in a sense that it's like because love is. I don't think it's something that should be. Because I think the romantic love, there's so much kind of this idea, like like the sorrows of young Werther, which Goethe actually famously kind of disavowed later on in his life, because he was like famously kind of not anti-romantic, but he was definitely, he was definitely to the point, he wasn't like fanatically anti, but he was definitely to the point where he was like kind of done with it. He was through with this idea that in order to, like the character in that, which he wrote pretty young too, so this is like one of his first works, I think, introductory. So Goethe says that like in that character kills himself. He kills himself over his love. And that's the kind of thing that you get, like people who kill themselves. Heinrich von Kleist. You get this sense. He wrote Michel Kohlhaas, and I've got to reread that though. But anyway, but yeah, it's this idea that you that in a kind of a murder suicide is like a kind of thing that seemed to go hand in hand. That people almost come to expect it. That romantic love has all these harbingers of like carrying it on to the afterlife, and like there is no greater thing, and thus I will not, or refuse to have anything else. If I can't have you, nobody can. And that's kind of a mentality. Is kind of toxic. It's kind of backwards, I think, in a sense. Maybe what Fromm would say is that love is like something that you can't just buy or purchase. Like something that it's like reflects. It's almost like a reciprocal, because it's like love is like a kind of dialectic. It's like almost like the only thing. It's almost like the only consistent kind of dialectical thing of like give yourself to someone, to sacrifice your time and dare say even your life for somebody, is like the best form of love, I think. But this is just gonna be waxing poetic, but yeah, but there is a lot of stuff that Fromm says about love that's very interesting that I thought was he also talks about like the desire to have something, right? Like a desire to have. He gives the anecdote of it was, I believe, the poet. I think it was. I wandered lonely through. It wasn't. It wasn't Wordsworth. It was. No, maybe it was. Tennyson. It was Alfred Lloyd Tennyson, the great romantic poet. Here's. So it does come full circle, kind of. But yeah, he was giving an anecdote about Basho and the difference between Basho, who is a Japanese poet, around the, I want to say, 12th the 13th century, maybe. I could be totally wrong with that. I should have known that because I did read a little bit of a collected thing, I think, a while back. But yeah, so Basho talks about seeing a flower, and like the fact is, and then he sees a flower, he's filled with joy by it, and then he wants to kind of pluck it, and that he feels the compulsion to pluck it, but then he realizes, he stops himself, and he's like, wait a second, if I pluck this flower, I know I'm going to kill it, and if that's not good for the great, kind of universal, kind of, in a Janus sense, not to say he was a Janus, but there's a similar principle of like not, stepping on bugs, like not stepping on, keeping away from plants. There's a great reverence and respect for nature, in sentient life, not in just kind of in the kind of overt sense of like a dog or a cat, like that's very easy kind of, but like to take that extra step of like, okay, I'm avowing not to ever harm any, and because there's karmic stuff for that too, so there's like a sincere kind of, but yeah, so Basho talks about that and then refraining from doing that, whereas Wordsworth in his version, and I think Goethe might have made these two connections, I think, in Tennyson's point, Tennyson, in his kind of experience, he actually he is overjoyed by and overtaken by it that he, in this flight of fancy, he ends up plucking the flower that's so beautiful and ends up killing it, and this desire to have it, to like actual pluck and feel like the actual thing, the essence of the nature, kind of overwhelms and kind of cancels out. And Fromm says that this is like, he contrasts these two as Basho was Basho wasn't any less, like reverent or any less infatuated or loving or admiring of nature, but he was also, he stopped himself, and that's like he was in the right, whereas Tennyson kind of overstepped his bounds a little bit. It's not something that's like the worst thing in the world. We all do stuff like that, but it does make you think a little bit. But anyway, so yeah, that is. I don't know if I have anything more else to say about that. But yeah, I thought it was a good introduction to Fromm. I definitely want to have a little bit. He's definitely on my radar now. And yeah, I will. But yeah, I like how he kind of had a collective kind of. He combined all these different kind of things that seem to be contrasting or seem to be, in a way that, psychoanalysis and also Marxian kind of stuff. He mentioned that kind of Marxist kind of thing of like how kind of Marx. I think he said that capitalism, like he was seemed to be very quite anti-capitalism, from like he had a pretty kind of like harshly kind of pessimistic view of, I think, and maybe for good reasons, I guess, like maybe he escaped kind of Nazi Germany. He saw kind of like the radical fascist kind of dictatorship of that, and in a similar sense of like Zweig and how Stefan Zweig. I just finished The World of Yesterday, which I really loved, and it was very depressing because he talks about his youth and like how the lost flowers of the yesteryear of that time of Austria, and like Vienna was just like a great cultural. It had its ups and downs, obviously, but like like Europe as a whole, like especially like central kind of, Germany, Austria, Hungary, maybe more so France, and like Switzerland, all these different places, Amsterdam, like they're all thriving, right? So, and then by the time, like the whole entire war-torn Europe, to see that twice, it was just a little bit too much for Zweig, and but anyway, so yeah, that kind of, but yeah, I think with Fromm, like he kind of, he escaped that kind of thing. He had to deal with that kind of thing too, but anyway, but yeah, that is Erich Fromm. Thanks for watching.